but life's a little bit like that, right? Like life, I'm starting to understand is these mini deaths and resurrections.
Is this the last time I'm doing this? Or is this the last time that I'm going to be in this space? How can I be so present?
Grateful for that process. So grieve and allow it to pass, but you're always going to come out.
And take in so much of all this experience right now, knowing that I'm not going to have it again. Today on the podcast, I have Sarah Harkness as a guest. She lives in Australia, has had one of those lives where you're like, how are you still alive? Over 25 surgeries, 3 of them brain surgeries, almost died 3 different times, and has turned her pain into her purpose. And our interview, our talk is so much fun, and just seeing all the little things that you need to do to live a life of abundance. So enjoy this episode. I definitely did. I can't wait to hear your feedback. All right, friends, I have Sarah Harkness on the podcast today. I'm so excited to share her story because we have a lot of similarities, which is a little scary. So Sarah, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, Jen.
Yes, my pleasure. Okay, so give us the background on Sarah. Run us from little Sarah to Sarah today.
Well, I'll give you the high level, but I grew up in Adelaide in South Australia, so it's a bit of a small country town in Australia, but 2 degrees of separation. The daughter of a nurse and a Uniting Church minister. So, you know, very wholesome upbringing. 2 brothers, went to an all-girls high school and studied drama. And my first company actually was a stage and screen company. And I put on plays and directed and produced, and then moved to Melbourne. Went off to Sydney and have been based in Sydney ever since. Went off to work for Salesforce for 10 years, Marketo, Dropbox and GitLab, all pre-IPO before starting my own business. And then I got a bit sick when my son Rocket was born. He'll be 4 next month, so wasn't that long ago. And then I went on a whirlwind roller coaster of Western medicine tomfoolery is what I'd say, butchery. I had 26 surgeries in 3 years.
Hey, listen, audience, 26 surgeries in 3 years, which I don't even know. Like, do you ever leave the hospital if something like that happens?
Pretty much. I think I calculated last year, it ended up being in total 6 months, in total, like a 6-month actual time. And I'd probably get about 2 weeks. Cause I'm writing it all in my book at the moment, but, going back and kind of revisiting some of the literal horror of, you know, being fed through a tube in your neck or, I won't get into the gory details, but some pretty horrific stuff. 3 of them were brain surgery, so that was pretty gnarly. And
okay, so how did, like, you had your son and then got sick, or were sick? Like, okay, so I don't understand the connection.
Well, so I think 3 pregnancies in as many years, right? So I had my kids consecutively, like 2 years apart, and actually kind of started to get neurological symptoms. I would stand up from feeding my son rivers in his cot, and I'd get, you know, spots, and a couple of times I dropped a mug, and we started thinking, oh gosh, is this the beginning of like an MS scenario? And a lot of my symptoms started really looking like that, because it was motor, it was neuron, it was pain. And then I got pregnant again, with Rocky, and I don't remember being sick during his pregnancy, but once he was born, I'd say nerve pain compounded with tachycardia symptoms. Like I would have these tachy episodes where I would just get this surge of adrenaline and cortisol in my body. It felt like a flash of heat going down my spine. And what would end up happening is I'd have like this quite quick gradual collapse, and eventually I'd faint. Like it wouldn't be just I'd stand up and I'd faint. My heart rate wasn't regulating well. So it started to be neuro, brain, heart, and then kind of gastro symptoms, and they compounded. So it was 6 months of just what is going on here. And it actually all really came to a head, quite literally, The first diagnosis was intracranial hypertension. So my brain was making too much cerebral spinal fluid, but it was doing that to compensate for something. So we couldn't work out why. They call it idiopathic. They don't know why. And I thought that was kind of funny. I was like, idiopathic, that must mean it's stupid. No, but it just means they had no origin. So if you get a brain tumor, your brain does the same thing. It'll compensate for the mass that's in your brain and create extra spinal fluid. And that is actually I'd say like the messenger for your whole nervous system, body and brain. So that travels down the spine and into your nerves that reach all areas of your body. So mine was starting to go haywire 6 months after he was born. I think what they ended up saying was because your blood volume doubles every time you have a baby, every single time. So that expansion and contraction of your body just put so much strain that it triggered probably some DNA that was already ready to go. Eventually, so intracranial hypertension, then they diagnosed POTS, so postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, so hence why the tachy episode. So I'm like, okay, now we're getting a picture, and they do interlink. But it wasn't until January this year, after they'd already taken out my large bowel, put in brain shunts that then got blocked. I had infection after infection, debridements, like you name it, the hell on earth that a woman can endure beyond childbirth. I actually do not know how I survived, besides I have a couple of inklings. Strong will, God, and miracles, really. But in January, they diagnosed autonomic dysreflexia, and that is life-threatening. So it sent me into a coma. It gave me a stroke. It created a lot of the dysfunction, but it's caused quite simply by a spine or spinal cord injury. So if you've fallen off a horse or you've had a car accident or things like that, you can get nerve compressions or damage done to the spinal cord. And I had a car accident 8 years ago where my C1, C2, the discs are impeding the spinal cord ever so slightly. But what it did was disconnect the nervous systems. And so that actually explained everything in the end. It explained intracranial hypertension, because if you've got a nerve compression pushing into the spine, the spinal fluid can't get up and down. So I have two separate nervous systems, the brain and the body, and they work separately. My body regulates itself because the brain can't quite get the message down, and any message or noxious stimuli that happens to the body, that message can't get up to the brain to help regulate. So they operate separately. It's like I've got, chicken head cut off. It's a little bit like that.
So they still operate separately, or were they able to make them sync?
They do. I'd say they're more in sync. I've become a lot more, from a nervous system perspective, through things like meditation, diet. I lost a lot of weight. In fact, 30 kilos in the last 4 months, through working with my, really. It actually probably is now, if it's August, it's actually more 8 months of this process. But in January, I found Dr. G, or Guillermo Navarrete, through the NEETRI program, through the Abundance 360 community, and he and his team pulled me together, sorted me out. We did some interesting therapies. We worked really hard, and I went from 90 kilos down to 65. I became incredibly, in alignment with myself, did meditation, like really transformed. And through that process, created a whole lot of abundance and transformation in my life. And it proved to me that the reason why I got through all of it was because I got through all of it. And that was an incredibly powerful moment for me to realize that I am the generator of my abundance, co-creating that with the universe. So yeah, that's pretty much the synopsis. The details are in the book, but it's really, it's gnarly stuff, actually.
Wow. Okay. So knowing, right, like it's so much easier to reflect on it now and say, I did that. like, wow, I can't believe I was capable and look what I can do. And the human spirit it is amazing when it gets challenged. But when you're in it, you don't have a choice. Like, I don't think people understand, like, you don't have a choice. You just have to go one foot in front of the other and just hope that better's coming. I mean, you live on faith of the standpoint of, here's where I'm at. There has to be something better in my future. And I'm going to keep doing the movement forward and have that connect. Now, I love what you said about you're connecting your body, you're doing the meditations, you're living in a space of abundance, and what an impact your health has had on every other aspect of your life. And I think a lot of times when we're healthy, we take health for granted. But once you're not healthy, you realize the only thing that matters is your health. And then everything else is possible.
And 3 kids, I mean, I totally agree. And in fact, part of, what I'm now doing moving forward in my 2 businesses is helping people find that, and working as a NEETRI representative, working really closely with the NEETRI team, effectively a NEETRI shark, because their group is called the Sharks. And so really, I'm really leaning into, I'm the living proof of this. However, there was a point in October of last year, I had my final surgery then. Touch wood, it's my final surgery ever, although there might be one more. There might be just one more just to get a couple of pieces of machinery out now that I don't need anymore. But there is a point where I went, this is just crazy. There was no one in the hospital room. There was no visitors. There was no support around. I barely had a nurse coming in. I was a frequent flyer to St. Vinny's in Sydney. And I just had prolapse surgery, which I don't know any women listening to this that has been through that. I do not wish that hell on anyone. And the doctor, this is a funny story, the doctor came in afterwards and said, oh, well, at least you're 21 again. And I said to him, excuse me, what the heck? Anyway.
Woo! Well, hey, you know what? You got to take the wins when you can take the wins, okay? There's no shame in taking the wins.
No one is going there for a long time. But yeah, that was like icing on the proverbial cake of a long winter in what I would call the depths of hell. And yeah, there are moments in that process where you're stuck in a bed, you cannot move, you can't speak, or you can't eat, or you can't walk anymore. There was literally so many moments of just, I'd say if you go back now, it would be, there were like moments of desperation or that visceral grief of all the things you're missing out on, or I don't know if you've ever had a really terrible day. And I use these data points as data, right? These are my data points to go, this is what I've come from, so this is not as bad as that. Like, it's comparative data all the time, and I operate a bit nerdy in that way, but that's my background in tech, right? So I use it. And in those moments, I kept going back to either a worse moment or a better moment. And so in October, after that surgery, it was particularly bleak and grim. And I just went, nah. And you mentioned choice. I actually feel like, and this is probably based on that piece of data point, being in that room and going, surely there must be more than this. There has to be more than this. Come on, show me more than this. What is there? Because I tell you what, these are not my people. This is not my place. There has to be people that can do better than what we've been doing. And I'm going to go out and damn well find them. And that was a choice. That was in that moment going, stuff this. But it was a conscious choice. And there was one other data point that I kind of want to challenge on. And that is, in May of last year, I had a moment, autonomic dysreflexia can send you into a coma. It can, anytime, give you a stroke, give you a heart attack. It sets your body into a state of complete fight, flight, because it can't regulate. It just goes, oh, some noxious stimuli happened. We need to go into fight. And so it would just turn on all of the bits and pieces that would keep you alive. But in doing so, it usually kills you. So it's a very dangerous thing to have. But these moments of meltdown is what I call them. I had one just going to the chemist with my ex-husband. And all of a sudden I started feeling like my legs were going offline, like they went a little bit numb, and it kept creeping up. And because I'd had a stroke and I'd had brain surgery and stuff, I was like, oh God, am I having a stroke? I'm having a stroke. It just was like I'd had a surge or a seizure. But what had actually happened was my bladder had gotten full. My body saw that as a noxious stimuli, sent a message up. It got scrambled here and it couldn't. So the message just stayed here and it started shutting my body down. I went into metabolic acidosis. And as a result, my whole body went to I went to sleep. So I couldn't speak. I couldn't hear. I couldn't move. By the time I got to the hospital and was on the resus table, I couldn't breathe. So I had a GCS of 3, Glasgow Coma Scale score of 3. And the funny thing about that scenario, and I say this is funny because I can look at it now and say it's funny, but at the time I was terrified. But I also was still me. And I could kind of consciously I could hear everything going on around me, could hear them trying to prick me with needles, lift up my arm, let it drop. They do all of these reflex testing. None of it. I was offline. I was really like, excellent. Finally, I get to end my suffering. I really thought, this is it. I'm dead. I'm dead. And just before they intubated me, my ex-husband said my kids' names and was like, don't you dare forget Rivers, Grace and Rocket. Don't you dare go anywhere. And his kind of, I want to say that it came from a place of love. I think he didn't want me to go so that I could still be there for the kids. And that's a gorgeous thing. I'm very grateful for that. But I tell you what, that was an incredibly powerful moment because instead of me laughing at them not being able to fix me and the sweet relief of ending suffering, I went, bugger it, you're right. You're right. I better switch out of this. And I made a conscious choice. And whatever will, whatever power, whatever life force I had remaining to fight, I found it. And it was like I went from the right to the left. And it was almost an instantaneous decision. But I remember it being like a flash of light to just go back into body and start damn well fighting. And I didn't want to feel anything that was going on in my body. My body had enough. But those 3 kids' names were the reason why I'm still alive.
I do feel like as mothers, we have this instinct, right? We have these little beings that came out of our bodies that we report to. They're watching us. We're demonstrating how to do life. And so when we have these choices, which I was in a car wreck, and I remember the minute the car hit the semi, like I had a choice to stay or go. And I was like, I'm staying. And then I stayed and I feel like there's a source above us that works through us. And I navigated that car accident and it was because of them. And then it gave me this reflection point. And I like how you said these data points that we collect in our lives, because we are a series of data points. We're a series of stories. And then we assign meaning to those data points. And then a meaning that we assign either supports us or victimizes us. And we have the choice to write that either way. And then when we get into these horrific situations, you're right. We have a time where we can say, oh my goodness, I was here before. I'm okay. I can survive this. Or this is my worst thing. I don't want to do this anymore. What's my best option to get out of this? And I think it's very fascinating in these horrific experiences that are out of body that you had the choice to say, no, I'm coming back. My kids are the reason why, and I'm going to do something with my life. And you have been through, I can't even imagine. I've had surgeries, mainly elective, because I want nicer boobs or whatever else, right? It is what it is. And I can't, even those, I'm like, I don't know if they're worth it. Like, I honestly don't know if it's worth it. So I can't imagine being in surgeries where it's not elective and it's continuous for that many years of life. And now you're using that pain for your purpose. And I do feel like anybody who's listening, if you're going through a hard time, if you're struggling right now, there's purpose to that pain. And that purpose is like, that pain is like making it so solidified in our being of our why, that when we get challenged to live our why, it doesn't have a chance. because we're so in tune with our purpose and our cause, and we do not want that pain to ever surface again. So we're going to do anything we can to like make that path forward to not have to experience that piece again. So what are you like? You're writing a book. So talk about the title of your book and how that's coming.
Well, I'm actually, the process of writing a book is like going through it all over again. And I started writing about that, like in the book, because I wanted it in the introduction. I kind of write like my brain thinks. I'm like a chapter here and then I'm over there and I'm all over the place and someone else can put the stories together. But because it was such a blur, I lose timelines and things like that. But was this surgery or that surgery, or there was one time from January to March of last year. So I missed my birthday again. I got so used to that. Or Mother's Days or Christmas Day. Christmas Day of one year I had a debridement. That was great. And my daughter came in to see me and I didn't see the rest of my family. It was just, that was Christmas Day. And pandemic, I want to also just remind everyone that all of this happened when the world was absolutely locked down. So I wasn't allowed visitors. I was barely allowed a doctor in the actual room with me. Everyone was at a distance. So they would do what they would do. And because the surgeries were not elective, I still, I had brain surgery when the whole of Sydney was in lockdown twice. And then the third one was like just when we were coming out, and that was in January of last year. But I had brain surgery in the same week as bowel surgery. And I just remember going, okay. And it became this normality. So you kind of end up, I find the human spirit is incredibly adaptable, right? And the body is an incredibly adaptable thing too. So when you're going through these, whether it's elective or not, and there were surgeries in there that I elected to do. There was one that, there was an abdomen one because, after Rocket was born, I had a nerve caught in the C-section scar. And so they did a hysterectomy. That went to absolute buggery. Then, I just couldn't get to that piece of pain. So I said, stuff it. And I found a plastic surgeon who did an abdoplasty, but she basically took that section of my body away. And after that, it fixed it. But I knew that process would fix it. So I started to get really good at research. I started to get really good at self-advocacy. And I started to get really good at, like, in a way, whilst I was fighting for my life in many scenarios, there was 3 really close near-death experiences, but, a lot of you're on the edge here. And so I'm writing about all of this and just getting it out. The book's called Guided by Giants. And the reason why it's called Guided by Giants is for, I hope, an obvious reason, but in October, in that hospital room, when I made that choice, I opened my laptop and I Googled and I found Fountain Life. Now, I'd already read Life Force by Tony and Peter Diamandis, right? I'd already read it. So I'd already been seeded with this whole idea of, okay, well, you have a choice and life is a consciousness and, hey, we're all connected. And I already knew that. I'm also an avid follower of quantum physics. So I had all of these kind of things seeded in me already, like 20 years, at least 10, really, really I would spend my weekends on my phone, not looking at TikTok, Googling journal articles about quantum physics because I'm just a nerd and I like data. So give me the data. And those data points help me kind of live out my life, kind of consciously curate these moments. I'd already felt like my life was a bit like a movie. I'd lived like that my whole life. But this really became I don't have a choice now. And if this is my movie, then I damn well get to decide the narrative. And this is not the narrative anymore. So I found Fountain Life. And I signed up immediately. Like I was like, I barely have any money. I hadn't been working. I'd been in hospital. So I'm just going to use whatever I've got and I'm going to back myself because these are the guys of anyone in the world. These are the guys. They've got the right doctors, the right mindset, and they've got all of the right resources. So if I can get in with them, maybe then I can fix this. And so I did. And then at the same time, off the back of that, as an ADHD woman would tend to go into 1,000 tabs. The next tab became Abundance 360. And before I'd even left the hospital, I'd had my intake interview to become a member of A360 in Abundance. And I was like, oh, I like this abundance. What's this? And started to get into what does abundance mean? By March, I'd gone to the Abundance 360 conference. I'd met Dr. G and joined his program. And frankly, Dr. G became the lifesaver. He became the lifeblood, life force for me, with me. He was a friend, but more importantly, he knew his stuff about how to become the pilot in the cockpit of your life. And that really appealed to me. And I'd seen Tony do it, seen Peter do it. And I was like, right, well, Dr. G, you're it. And it became an obsession for me to follow his program to a T. But beyond that, it became I got results immediately. So I started getting all these results. And so that's why Guided by Giants, because they were my giants. And I actually had a dream. I had a dream about Stephen Hawking's book, which is, Standing on the Shoulders of Giants, while I was at Abundance. And I woke up in the morning and I Googled the title because I was like, this is my book, right? And I was like, no, Stephen's already written a book like that. And so I was like, I'm being guided by these guys without them even realizing it. I need to give them credit. So, the book features Dr. G, hoping to get Peter on it, and is out in September. So I've got draft 1 almost finished. And the other thing that happened at Abundance was I started to try to explain this to people that couldn't understand. So my family, my friends started to see change in me and they couldn't understand. This is actually one of the sad things I think about when you start to get better or recover. There's always a sacrifice. And often the things that get sacrificed are the people that don't want to come on that journey with you. And they have gotten so used to a narrative that is no longer true. And so there's a lot of people that haven't made it in the process with me. And that's quite sad. There's grief that comes with that.
There's a lot of grief of that. And I think that's not discussed as much when we're on our path of purpose. When we're on our path of purpose, there's people that are in different seasons, and those people that you hold on to and you think are like your ride or die are not. And learning how to process that grief and still move forward and understand and just be grateful for the time and the role that they played in your life and appreciate that for what it is. And then still having the courage to continue and know that, hey, you were brought in. This is how far you're going to go. I'm sad about it, but I'm going to allow that to be. And then new people get to come in and sit at the table with you and do the next thing. But that doesn't mean you're not sad about it.
But I don't miss the me that was with them. I miss the me that brought value to them. Like I miss that connection with them, right? I miss them more than really, I just miss their presence and their time. And I think too, when you're in relationships, so relationships dissolve. I got divorced, and that had to happen. I was with my ex for 16 years, but it also, all these mini deaths and you'd think you'd get used to not, you fight death and you're like, come on, am I alive just for this? And that suffering, you're like, I don't want to suffer anymore. I think those mini deaths keep coming, but life's a little bit like that, right? Like life, I'm starting to understand is these mini deaths and resurrections all the time. And whilst I had that to an extreme, you have too, like we've had these extremes of really knowing what it's like to be on that edge. And someone's called Kimberly the other day said on the Crown Yourself podcast, she said it really is a little bit like death and resurrection, but you get to come into a new version, and it's almost a little bit like an upgrade of self, and you're really incredibly grateful for that process. So grieve and allow it to pass, but you're always going to come out.
Yeah, it's that whole death, rebirth. Yeah, the death, rebirth, the death, rebirth, the death, rebirth cycle. And I was actually listening to somebody else talking about this the other day, saying, in your 90s or when you're 100, you're going to have your final death. But every day that we're living, we are having death, right? And he was talking about how when he was in his 20s, he hiked across the Himalayas. And he didn't realize, like, that's the death of that dream. He's not in shape to ever be able to do that dream again. I climbed to the top of Everest. That moment was so special because I knew that I'm never going to see the world from this vantage point again. I'm never going to be in these spaces again or this piece again. And so a lot of times when we're doing life, if we really think about, hey, is this the last time I'm doing this? Or is this the last time that I'm going to be in this space? How can I be so present and take in so much of all this experience right now, knowing that I'm not going to have it again and being okay with the fact that I'm not going to have it again? And obviously there's some things that are easier to metabolize than others when it comes to the loss and to the death of this experience. But knowing that this experience is going to die, it allows us to live so fully in this moment. I think one of the biggest gifts my car accident gave me was I don't get to choose when I die. I don't get to choose that last breath, but I sure get to choose all the breaths in between. And so my best thing I can do today is live the most I can with this day because it's dead. It's dead after tomorrow. It's dead after this next hour.
No, just that I got to a point where I was so much in the moment and almost saw too much the other side of like the extreme of that, where I would disassociate from pain so much and just be so present that you know, I would drop balls at work, or you know, I was like, how is this even important? And it is actually hard to kind of go back to a semi-normal life when you've gone through this, because you just don't have the perspective you have is so extreme on the other side, and every moment is so precious. People don't understand that that's why you run so fast, that's why you do so much, or that's why you're like constantly in motion, because you know how incredibly precious life is. And I think there was a point where I just, as a way to deal with it, I just got really busy and I got really excited, but that impacted my health. So the only thing I'd say with that is that balance is also really important. And in that moment, I'm now incredibly compassionate and have a huge amount of self-love. And that took a long, long time to develop. I think part of my butcher journey, if you will, or this health journey, in part might have been a subconscious self-sabotage in some way, or there was some processing that had to happen. And I think a lot of it played out quite an interesting narrative that I now can look back on and have perspective over. That was like, I went chasing pain and these things were created, and not every surgery I had to do, but I knew that the next thing and the next thing and the next thing eventually would bring out this abundant outcome. But it meant I had to actually consciously go into the pits of hell. And I no longer needed to do that the moment I decided I was worth more than that. I didn't need the suffering to alchemize. Yes, that's a powerful, incredible tool to be able to do that, but I actually don't need it. And where I am now, and the one thing that I'm very proud of, is I can use suffering and I can use abundance, and both of them give me the same amount of energy. And that was like getting to that point, climbing that summit, if you will. That's been really, really fun and hard, but fun.
Right. And you would say, and what I like about your story is you're saying, okay, I made this choice to do different. I had to bring different people into my life that are serving as mentors and anchors and people that are holding you accountable and something that you can like plug into and move energetically forward with. That we are not islands. We are a connected species. We do things together. Who we hang out with, who we associate with, what we read, what we consume, all this stuff impacts how we show up. And so when you made that choice to do different, you changed other things in your life to support that difference.
And I'm not kidding. By March, I'd done Abundance 360. I met Obama in March. I went to Necker Island in April. Like the abundance that has been created through this process, and the alchemy of is literally one extreme to another. But I just started getting really focused on, all right, well, now I need to show what you can do, what you're made of if you actually consciously choose different. And it wasn't just getting better, and it wasn't just creating abundance or, you know, having these moments in my life that were simple, because they're just as important as these big moments. But like you said, they were like my Everest summits. And to sit across and have dinner with Richard Branson and you know, be part of the Virgin Unite community now, joining Tony's, you know, membership at a great level, and, you know, being essentially leaning into the abundance I could create, it now has become, that is my job. That is my focus. That is what I coach people on. That doesn't matter what kind of thing you're suffering. If you make that choice, this is the outcome. And so now I'm quite determined to almost, in any way, shape or form, be that example. And how we can also then use technology to help us along that journey too, in a collaborative way. That's my purpose. And that's why I'm doing abundance coaching. That's why I'm writing the book, as painful as that is to go back and revisit all of this. I want to be the living example of abundance, because I truly created it in my life. I am it. You are it. We all are it. And we should be able to lean into, tap into, create. It's so powerful. That force that you're talking about. And I'm so incredibly grateful that I've had, I guess, the realization that I was never alone. I had God the whole time. Always did. Was never alone. I say that I was alone, but I was never alone. And you know what? That is the only reason why I'm still here, I think, to be honest.
No, I feel like it's always there. It's ourselves and our stories that cut us off from the flow. And so when we're feeling alone and we're not there, that's a chance for us to reflect back in on ourselves and say, okay, that's not true. So what am I doing currently to cut myself off from this energy, from this abundance, from this flow? And that's my work to do right now. Right. So how do people work with you? Like, where are you? What do we do to connect with you? How do we work with you? What's your sweet spot right now for everybody that's listening?
Amazing. So I work with individuals to create and generate abundance in their own life, alchemize this suffering. I do that through my coaching program, which is Abundance with Sharky. And I also work with the NEETRI team, which is Dr. G and Fabi and that group under that program. And we help people transform their health and their environments to support the abundance we're creating. So that's abundancewithsharky.com. Then you've also got Project Lotus, and I help businesses do the same thing. And we specifically work with organizations that are making an impact and a difference in the world. And we look at their funnels. Where's the dysfunction? Where's the blockage? And we alchemize it with abundance. So it's really businesses and people, but wherever I can, I'm just trying to spread as much of that joy, love, compassion. My daughter drew a little love. So, just really, on a mission to, like I said, be that shining example. And you can come work with me. You can find me on Insta at, mama_Sharky.
And what I love about this conversation is that you live it. Like, I can feel it in your voice. I can feel it in your energy, and you've been there. So I think those of us who are coaches and supporting others that have been to the depths have the ability to help you navigate out of them, and are so passionate about it because we know what it's like and we know what's possible. And I really appreciate you taking all this energy, taking all this and saying, here's a different story, and I'm here to help you on your path.
Absolutely. Anytime. I love it. Acts of service is my love language. So to me, it's this lights me up. It gives me energy, and, you know, I'm excited to meet as many people as I can. And I've got examples and proof points. You know, like I said, my ex-husband was one of my guinea pigs, one of my very first clients, if you will. And I've been able to help him so much. So, you know, it's pretty amazing to be able to still have the ability to rise above whatever adversity you've been going through, and even show somebody that level of unconditional compassion and love. To still help them. So yeah, I'm excited.
I love it. All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. And I can't wait to see all the abundance you generate in the world.
Absolutely.